We have told you about PFAS, a likely carcinogen, and the contamination in drinking wells throughout Kent County.
But how much PFAS has tainted families for years, possibly decades? The results of the few blood tests so far are shocking, including high levels of PFAS in a 20-month-old boy. Tonight, Target 8 investigator Ken Kolker explores the debate over blood testing, getting his own test done, and learns how the state is now considering area-wide blood draws. Ken.
Yeah, Marley and Brian, this growing crisis involving Wolverine worldwide contamination has sparked a growing debate between health experts and those hit the hardest, the neighbors who until recently drank that tainted water. Hi, how are you?
Can I help you?
Yeah, I'm here. Let's get a PFAS test.
Okay.
I've got this kit.
Okay.
I guess the ice.
Yep, and it's all frozen solid for us?
Yep.
Good deal. I'm going to have you turn the camera off at this point in time.
I grew up in the city of Rockford until I was 8.
This is it, 179 Highland.
That's me on my front porch with my big sister and Buck Berry, an old TV cowboy. That was 50 years ago. Until 2000, Rockford got its city water from the Rogue River, 2 blocks downstream from the Wolverine worldwide tannery, which is still soaked in PFAS that flows to this day into the river. PFAS was in the Scotchgard that Wolverine used to treat shoes from 1958 to the early 2000s. So there's a good chance I drank PFAS back then.
There seems to be only one logical conclusion, that people were drinking a lot of contaminants in the water that maybe nobody realized were there, but that's the fact.
Getting a PFAS blood test isn't very complicated. The Kent County Health Department has steps to follow on its website, even though it doesn't recommend it. But it's pricey.
This is Jennifer.
Oh, hi, Jennifer. Hey, my name is Ken Kolker. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Hi, Ken.
How are you?
Vista Analytical in California, one of the few labs testing blood for PFAS.
I'm wondering if I should just go ahead and order the kit.
They prefer the money up front, $150 for the kit, $525 for the test, $675 total by credit card. Insurance won't cover it.
How long before the test results are done, generally?
I really, we've been very busy for the past several months with this type of testing. Worst case scenario, 2 months.
In a few days after I got a required doctor's order, the kit arrived. A small styrofoam cooler, a test tube for my serum, and ice packs. It's into the freezer. Then several hours later, off to the lab.
Hi.
An hour after that, my blood was drawn and ready for delivery.
So here is the cooler packed on ice that, oh boy, holds my serum. I'm gonna make sure I pack this back the way it was. And there it is right there. There's the blood serum. Hey, I've got to ship out a PFAS blood sample. Okay. I'm sure you've got a few of these.
Yep.
Overnight to Vista Analytical. The serum's got to stay cold. Only a handful of people in Kent County's growing PFAS zones have done this, in part because the health department says it's not necessary.
What that has largely told us is that blood testing is not very useful for us.
Most health officials, the county, the state, the feds, say PFAS blood tests won't make you easier to treat. They say blood tests are not needed to prove you have PFAS in your system. If you drink contaminated water, they say, it's in your blood.
You're going to have a measurable, a significant level of this in your system. If you've been drinking that water, that's pretty much a given.
It accumulates and stays there for years.
I would never stop anybody from getting their blood tested. It's a limiting right now for clinicians or healthcare providers to estimate what the health impacts may be.
Jim Watts isn't buying that. He's lived near the House Street dump for 30 years, but has only low levels of PFAS in his well. At least That's what his one and only recent test has shown. Blood tests, he says, if they come back high, might show if his well's PFAS levels were higher before.
If you look at the map of how all this is spreading out, we're right dead in the center. We could have been much higher in the past. We just don't know because that was never tested for that.
He wants blood tests for his family, especially his wife, who has environmental asthma.
2 tanks here.
He wonders if it's from using a humidifier for years, filling their bedroom with PFAS-tainted mist.
And I think that, frankly, the health department and Wolverine should step up to the plate and deal with this. I think they owe it to the residents here in this community.
In West Virginia, doctors tested the blood of 69,000 people for PFAS after a crisis there, linking the chemical to 6 diseases: testicular and kidney cancers, ulcerative colitis, thyroid problems, high cholesterol, and hypertension in pregnancy.
How bad is this stuff?
Bad.
But the PFAS levels here are much higher than they were in West Virginia.
Everybody that's in that area needs to be tested and followed.
Blood tested?
Yeah, blood tested and followed.
I've always said if you have data, you can make decisions.
Sandy Winstelt, who lives across from Wolverine's old polluted House Street dump, has 5 million parts per trillion of PFAS in her blood, the most that local and state officials have ever heard of. She drank the water for 24 years. Her husband died of cancer, and she's had thyroid problems. Now she says her doctor knows what else to look for.
And I sure may die of something totally unrelated. But at least I'm going to be able to know confidently that I looked at all the things that we do know are connected, so I can address those quickly.
Tobin McNaughton was shocked when local health officials said that blood tests were not needed. Her 21-month-old son, Jack, who is often sick with colds and ear infections, has 484,000 parts per trillion in his blood, almost as much as the groundwater at Wolverine's old tannery.
Saying that, these things aren't necessary, it's hard to hear those words, because I feel like everything having to do with Jack's health is necessary.
She says her son's toxicologist is using her son's test results.
The toxicologist said for the rest of Jack's life, he's under his surveillance.
As for my test, the results won't be in until March. Question is, will I have the same low levels as the average American? Almost everybody has some in them. PFAS used to be in Teflon, sprayed on furniture and carpeting, used on fast food wrappers.
So I grew up in Rockford until I was 7 or 8. I'm 58 now. I got my blood tested for PFAS yesterday.
Did you? Okay.
What would you expect me to find?
I would expect that you're going to have a measurable amount of PFAS.
The same as everyone else? Or do you think...
Hard to say. I'll be fascinated to hear from you if you're willing to share those when you get those.
Now, the state told us it's working with the CDC to develop a new health study in the Rockford and Belmont area that could actually include widespread blood testing that could help the nation learn more about the impacts of PFAS, but a decision on that has not been made.
And Ken, I'm sure viewers have a question. You drank this water. How is the health in your family?
Well, interestingly, when my mom was in her mid-20s, she got thyroid cancer. And when I was in my early 20s, I had half my thyroid removed.
And so, that's one of those conditions?
That's one of the 6 conditions, yeah.
Wow.
Obviously, you can't make a direct correlation.
Right.
It's impossible
more
to do that.
More research has to be done, but
yeah, much more.
Still concerning.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll wait for those results. Yeah. Ken Kolker, thank you.
Yeah, Marley, these results came in sooner than we thought. It took about a month instead of the 2 months that we expected.
They show I've got PFAS in my system, slightly higher levels of one of the PFAS compounds than the average American.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what these numbers mean.
Yeah, so I would say bad news and good news. The bad news is that, yes, you have PFAS compounds in your blood serum, like probably 95% of the rest of the American population.
My test was for the two most widely studied compounds of PFAS, PFOS and PFOA. It cost me $675. My PFOS level came in at 7.4 parts per billion, above the national average of 6.3. But my PFOA levels came in less than 1 part per billion, half the national average.
The good news, Ken, is that I would have a hard time picking your blood results out of a lineup.
He can't say the same, though, for Sandy Winstelt, whose blood PFAS levels were the highest seen anywhere, ever. 5,000 parts per billion, hundreds of times higher than mine. I tested my blood to highlight the debate over these tests. I've got this kit.
I'm going to have you turn the camera off at this point in time.
Attorneys for residents argue that they're needed to help measure potential health risks. They recently paid to test the blood of about 45 people and are still waiting for results. Some health officials, though, say it's enough just knowing you drink bad water.
If your drinking water is contaminated excessively with PFAS, you are going to have it in your system. That's something that we can predict.
And a little, according to the health experts, can do as much as a lot. The question for me is, how did it get into my blood? I grew up in Rockford, lived there till I was 8. That's me and my big sister with TV cowboy Buck Berry on my front porch, back in the 1960s. That means I drank straight from the Rogue River, which until about a decade ago was the source for Rockford city water. The old water plant was literally 2 blocks downstream from where I'm standing today, the site of Wolverine's former tannery, which to this day is soaked in PFAS. Which means I probably drank PFAS.
It's possible that it could be from back then.
And that my levels were far higher when I was growing up and slowly dropped over the years. PFAS can stay in your system for a long time.
Or it's possible that it could be an exposure that you've had relatively recently as well.
Because until 2002, PFAS was everywhere, in Teflon, Scotchgard, on fast food wrappers. Experts say there's no way to tell if it caused my thyroid problems in my 20s, or my mom's thyroid cancer in her 20s. But the doctor who led blood sampling for 69,000 people after a PFAS crisis in West Virginia says even my level is unsafe.
It's active biologically in you. It's making some changes in your cholesterol and probably your immune system.
He thinks everybody in Wolverine's PFAS crisis should have their blood tested. In West Virginia, where PFAS levels were far lower than in Kent County, the study found probable links to kidney and testicular cancers, ulcerative colitis, thyroid problems, hypertension in pregnancy, and high cholesterol.
The only way you can be absolutely sure that you're safe from this stuff is not have any of it in you.
Now, the county says it's working with the CDC on a possible study of people in Kent County with extremely high levels of PFAS in their water. That study, they say, could include blood tests.
That's right, because there is so much more research that really needs to be done so we can learn more.
Yeah, all the scientists say that there's just not been enough work done on it. And they're looking in Kent County at doing a health study, a cancer cluster study in that area, and that's something that's still in the works.
Well, that's what we really want to see. Okay, thank you, Ken.
Think of it like a giant fish tank filter clearing out some of the likely carcinogen flowing from Michigan's first known PFAS site.
The question is, would the same system being used at a former Air Force base work on Wolverine Worldwide's PFAS that is spreading through northern Kent County?
Target 8 investigator Ken Kolker and photojournalist Bilal Kurdi traveled to Oscoda looking for an answer. Ken.
Brian Marley, at the former Wordsmith Air Force Base, the U.S. government spent $3 million on a filter system targeting just one of many PFAS hotspots.
This is granular activated carbon. We have 20,000 pounds of in each one of those GAC vessels. It's like you use for your fish tank or something.
GAC, G-A-C. It stands for granular activated carbon, like in a fish tank filter, or the whole house filters Wolverine installed in hundreds of contaminated homes in Algoma and Plainfield Townships. only with tanks as tall as a 2-story house. The Air Force built this plant 3 years ago, right on top of a PFAS-choked plume of groundwater.
There was a plume emanating from a former fire training area that the Air Force used firefighting foam at for years and years.
It was the fire training pit where Wordsmith firefighters used PFAS foam to practice putting out jet fuel fires until the early 1990s. The PFAS flows from that pit toward Clark's Marsh, not far away, where the fish are filled with the likely carcinogen.
Well, you can't eat the fish. You can't even eat, you're not supposed to eat even one of those fish.
Well, thank you very much for that, Kathy.
Here, residents complain that the Air Force and state are not doing enough to clean the contamination discovered 8 years ago. The chemical has also flowed off base in other directions and into wells. It foams up on a nearby lake. So far, though, it's just the bad water flowing into Clark's Marsh that the Air Force filters are cleaning. 7 extraction wells, tapped 60 feet into the groundwater, form an underground wall, kind of like a good defensive line in football. The PFAS water headed for that marsh is instead sucked into a massive tank.
And then it goes through the carbon filters, which are 20,000 pounds of activated carbon. Okay. They're operated in series, so it goes through one and then the other.
About 240 gallons a minute. Then it's piped back out on the other side of that defensive line and into the groundwater bound for the marsh. Every 3 months or so, he says, Calgon Carbon vacuums out the coal from one of the tanks and incinerates the PFAS right out of it at a cost of 30 grand a trip.
This isn't cheap.
No, it's not.
More proof that it works, he says. When it started, the water came into the plant with a PFAS count of 10,000 parts per trillion, far above the danger level. Now, he says, it's less than half that.
So what is that saying about what this system's doing?
Well, it's working.
Yeah?
Yeah.
The state says it's too soon to know if any of this would work for Wolverine. It could depend on geology and what else is in the water.
So we're, looking at all sorts of options. We, in Rockford, as in here, you heard him talk about several different potential options here. So we aren't sure what the solution is going to be yet. We aren't sure how effective those options are going to be and which one will be best, but we're going to work on it. Wolverine's PFAS is from the Scotchgard it used to treat shoes at its tannery in Rockford. It dumped it in sludge at landfills and on farm fields decades ago. Wolverine's PFAS zone has grown to 5 miles long and 5 miles wide, roughly twice the Wordsmith area. It has spread into 400 wells in Algoma and Plainfield Townships, some with the highest PFAS levels anyone has ever seen, far higher than at Wordsmith. The levels are highest at Wolverine's old tannery site, and it's leaking into the Rogue River.
I guess I don't understand why it wouldn't work in a place like the Rockford area with the Wolverine.
Depends on the size of the plume, how many of these you would need.
Yeah.
But the Air Force says its fish tank system isn't a quick fix.
What we're looking at is it takes, many years.
So this is not short term?
No.
In the face of pressure from the state, the Air Force says it plans to build a second treatment plant at Wordsmith, twice the size of the first, on top of another plume of bad groundwater, and it hopes to start using that in August. I'm Target 8 investigator Ken Kolker.
Lawsuits over the PFAS contamination crisis in northern Kent County.
The Rockford shoemaker says that there's no proof that PFAS hurts humans and no evidence it should have known its dumping would taint wells.
Target 8 investigator Ken Kolker has covered this story since the beginning. He has the latest for us tonight. Ken?
Yeah, Brian and Sue, Wolverine today responded to 52 of the 89 lawsuits it's now facing in Kent County and asked the judge to dismiss them all.
That includes the case of Hunter Nafziger, who was 6 weeks old when he died from a heart defect in May 2015. His mom claims Hunter didn't survive surgeries because preeclampsia caused by drinking PFAS-laced water forced her to give birth too soon. In its responses, Wolverine denied any wrongdoing and denied as untrue that animal and human studies have shown that PFAS can harm human health. That despite a study of 69,000 people in West Virginia that found probable links to 6 diseases, including kidney and testicular cancers. Wolverine used 3M's Scotchgard with PFAS for several decades to treat shoes until 3M stopped using the chemical in 2002. The 89 cases filed so far have accused Wolverine of causing 3 deaths, at least 9 miscarriages, and leading to cancer and other illnesses to more than 60 people in Algoma and Plainfield Townships. Wolverine denied dumping its tannery sludge illegally for decades, including at the House Street dump in Belmont. It denied that it should have taken action after 3M sent Wolverine a letter in 1999 warning of the potential harm of PFAS, a letter first revealed by Target 8. It denied knowingly putting nearby residents at risk and said it had no obligation to warn them. Wolverine also says there is, quote-unquote, no imminent danger to anyone's health because it has provided either whole house filters or bottled water to residents. It asked the judge to dismiss the cases in part because they are similar to a federal class action suit it already is facing, and it has already asked a federal judge to dismiss that.
Now, there is no date yet for any hearings in these cases, which could take months and months to resolve. Wolverine has said it plans to spend $40 million on the PFAS crisis, much of that for testing and providing water to neighbors.
The day on the Thornapple. He's there tonight to show us the foam that's forming there.
The foam has been building up here on the east bank of the Thornapple River, right below the Cascade Dam. Some neighbors say they want to know what's in it. Have you ever seen the foam like that?
No.
Some riverfront neighbors told Target 8 they want the foam tested for PFAS, a likely carcinogen.
It's not like soap suds. It's more like if you put like shaving cream on the water surface.
The DEQ says photographs of Thornapple River foam taken by Target 8 are prompting them to test it. One showed foam piled high along the river. Another showed it clinging to a stick.
A couple weeks ago, I was out there and we had a stack of foam on the edge of the water that was probably about a foot high.
Health officials yesterday issued an advisory for the Rogue River in Rockford after tests below the Rockford Dam found extremely high levels of PFAS in the foam. That dam is directly downstream from Wolverine Worldwide's old tannery, where the shoemaker used PFAS-tainted Scotchgard for decades. As for the Cascade Dam, that is downstream from the Gerald R. Ford International Airport, where firefighting foam containing PFAS was used for decades. Private tests have found 15 wells with low levels of PFAS near the airport, but there have been no tests of the river itself. The state says it could take weeks to get test results for the foam.
If my grandkids could swim down there, I probably wouldn't allow them to do so because it's pretty nasty looking and I don't know what it is. So,
airport officials say they're still waiting for results from PFAS tests of groundwater on the airport ground itself. They expect those results to come sometime in July. In Cascade Township, Ken Kolker, 24-Hour News 8.
Hall live right now on our mobile app. Then we'll have a complete recap tonight at 10 on WXSP and 11 right here on Wood TV 8.
Tonight, Target 8's learning that the state is focusing on a long-closed paper mill and a neighboring dump as a source for the PFAS in Parchment. Take a look at this map from the city's water. The city's water wells are nearby. More than 3,000 people are on bottled water tonight in the Parchment area. This after high levels of the likely carcinogen was discovered in the city's water supply. Target 8 investigator Ken Kolker has been breaking developments on the PFAS contamination here in West Michigan over the last year, and Ken's live in Parchment breaking new information tonight. Ken.
Yeah, good evening, Brian. These hills behind me may look natural, but they're actually built of sludge from a nearby paper mill that's been out of business almost 20 years. Now, sources close to the investigation say they are taking a close look at this entire area as a source of the PFAS, and it's less than a mile from Parchment's tainted wells. Larry Fike worked at Crown Vantage Paper Mill on the northern edge of Parchment along the Kalamazoo River until it closed in 2000.
I was one of the last ones out.
Were you really?
Yeah, okay. I worked there for 35 years.
Okay. They made wax paper for cooking, stationery, at one time Christmas wrapping paper. But the former worker said he had never heard of PFAS.
The water that come out of there was nasty, and it was nasty. And where did it go? I don't know. I never knew where it went.
Crown Vantage thrived for decades, one of several paper mills in Parchment. You can see it here in this 1950s aerial. But it's abandoned now, owned by a Colorado partnership with plans for a development that have stalled.
When this came up, I thought, well, I don't know, maybe it was a mill.
State officials have identified paper mills as a possible source of PFAS, which was used in production. The Cooper Township supervisor told us the state is testing monitoring wells near the old mill. That mill is less than a mile upriver from Parchment's contaminated wells. Then there's the paper mill's dump between Crown Vantage and those wells. The 82-acre dump is owned by Cooper Township. Fike, the former paper mill worker, has lived most of his life next to that dump.
This was flat. This is all stuff that they had dumped in here.
He used to be able to see the Kalamazoo River from here, but now hills made of paper sludge block his view.
It was more of a sludge pulp type stuff that went in there.
Okay. Neighbors say it hasn't been used as a dump for at least 20 years. Now they're drinking bottled water and waiting for answers.
I have to open so many bottles of water during the day. I mean, it takes me 4 bottles of water just to fill the coffee pot. 4 for the dog's dish in the morning, 2 for the cat, and hard telling how many of the kids around here is going to drink.
Now, water distribution will continue tomorrow at Parchment High School between noon and 8 p.m. Live in Cooper's Township, Ken Coker, 24-hour News 8.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Ken, we're reporting that Parchment's like flushing the water system. Is it possible that that system will ever be safe to use again, or will they have to find a whole new well in a watershed?
Well, from the gathering, they're hooking up to Kalamazoo's water supply, so that you would think should solve that problem, but that's a work in progress.
All right, Ken Coker live tonight. Thank you, Ken. Coming up.
PFAS crisis in West Michigan for years now. He's live in our Kalamazoo studio with the findings. Ken?
Brian and Sue, the results we found at the Kalamazoo River were high enough to merit a health advisory, though that's a decision made by health officials.
Target 8 tested for the likely carcinogen in Kalamazoo River water at D Avenue. That's about 2 miles downstream from Parchment's contaminated wells, which in turn are just down from the suspected PFAS source, a former paper mill and landfill. We use kits and instructions from Trident Labs in Holland, one of 2 in the state that tests for PFAS. Today, Trident reported it found more than 21 parts per trillion in that river water. That's higher than the levels on the Rogue River in Rockford, downstream from its PFAS source, Wolverine Worldwide. The state limit for surface water is 12 because the chemicals accumulate in fish. Already, state fish advisories warn against eating fish from this stretch of the Kalamazoo River, but that's because of PCBs, not PFAS. We also tested 2 bottles of Ice Mountain, the water being handed out in Parchment, bottles that Gary Burnham had gotten last week from the distribution center. Some viewers, including Burnham, wondered if they were safe.
They came back perfectly clean, no PFAS.
That's good. Big relief, you know, especially when you find out your regular water you drink all your life is contaminated.
He learned today that his private well is ripe with PFAS.
I believe it was 148.
Parts per trillion, a lot less than Parchment's municipal wells, but still more than double the EPA level for safe drinking, which means he'll stick with bottled water for now.
Corn on the cob took 15 bottles.
Now, the Kalamazoo County Health Department refused to discuss our findings. In an email, the DEQ says it started testing the Kalamazoo River on Monday, though it likely won't get the results for at least a week. It said tests of the river near Allegan 5 years ago found lower levels of PFAS. Back to you.
Worldwide is refusing to pay to send clean city water to hundreds of homes contaminated by its dumping of PFAS, leading to angry words from township leaders.
Target 8 investigator Ken Coker has covered the PFAS crisis for more than a year. He has the latest.
We're in the Plainfield Township water treatment plant, and this is the PFAS-free water that the township wants to send to contaminated zones in Plainfield and Algoma townships, and they're angry that Wolverine is refusing to pay for it. The townships held a joint press conference today to voice their frustrations. They were the strongest words yet from township officials over a PFAS crisis that first came to light 18 months ago. They hope by next spring to start extending city water.
We were ready to go this year. The only delay was Wolverine. And now we're going to miss 2019 as well. And we're beyond frustrated with Wolverine. This has been irresponsible. While we've been working hard, executives at Wolverine have been cowering in a corner hoping that this would go away. This is just appalling.
The townships in the state sued Wolverine this year for its dumping of PFAS from the Scotchgard it used to treat hush puppies. Some wells in Algoma Township have the highest PFAS levels ever recorded in drinking water. Township officials say they were working toward a consent decree in which Wolverine would pay the estimated $30 million to extend water to some 500 homes. Wolverine already has installed massive filters at homes, but township officials say that city water is the only permanent fix.
Our families are concerned for their health. Our families are concerned about the adverse impacts that this could have on property values.
But they say Wolverine backed out at the last minute, refusing to pay unless 3M, the maker of PFAS, helps cover the cost.
The company has told us over and over and over again that it cares about our community and it wants to do the right thing. Was that empty rhetoric? Was it outright lies? I guess we'll wait to see on that. Clearly, we were wrong to trust Wolverine to do the right thing on their own.
For its part, Wolverine denies that it has backed away from the negotiating table and says it has worked for months to get 3M involved. In Plainfield Township, Ken Kolker, 24 Hour News 8.